Good afternoon, everyone. Glad you could join us today. I'm Tom Suter, the founder of ATARC, and you're here today for the DevOps during the pandemic era. It should be a great discussion today. We're looking to kick things off with Nick Shalon, the Chief Software Officer of the Air Force, and then we'll have a panel discussion. We plan on having a few polls, and we're going to open it up to questions. So we're really excited about today. And before we get started, I want to thank the GitLab team, Helen Ortel and Tracy Robinson. They've been a great partner. I remember when they started their, when they started their practice, they had one person like 2 years ago. And it really tells you about the growth of DevOps. And I think they're up to over 50 people now. So I was just, in prepping for this webinar, I was looking back for ATARC about how things have changed so quickly. And I just remember we had our Devops Summit on March 10th. I had to double look that to make sure that that was actually, 5 weeks ago. We got 250 attendees at that show. The only thing we talked about pandemic was we were elbow bumping. It was just fantastic times, great times. We actually had a happy hour. I didn't realize that was going to be the last happy hour I would attend, and I haven't even gone to one since. If we think back on it, I think it was that Wednesday that the president addressed the nation and we realized the severity of what was going to happen here. And by March 12th, I think if we actually had the summit on that Thursday, nobody would have showed. So that tells you a little bit about how things have changed. And I've talked to a lot of people in the government, and I think that people were in three different groups post-pandemic. The first one was the folks that actually had a robust telecommuting program. I think that they might have been in the best shape. Maybe tweaking up their VPN licenses, adding some bandwidth, some minor tweaks. We've had other groups that have been some telecommuting, mostly at the office. I think they've had some additional struggles to maneuver. Some of them didn't have laptops. Some of them didn't have telecommuting. A lot of their roles were in the office. And then the intelligence community and parts of the DoD is you're working behind a SCIF. So how is that going to really affect how you're going to work? But we're really, really lucky today to get Nick Shalon with us today. And he actually presented at the Devops Summit. And boy, things have changed, Nick. And glad you could make it today. I know you're really, really busy with handling all these things pandemic.
Thanks for having me. And yeah, everything changed. It's kind of interesting to see, like you mentioned, that was also my last engagement with you guys. So yeah, it's a different world now. And one thing that's very interesting for us has been the fact that DevSecOps has been the prime enabler to be able to move at the pace of relevance in this new situation with the virus. So I'll share a little bit of quick stories, and I also wanted to point out a couple of slides, but again, I'm going to stay off the slides most of the discussion here. And again, do I have 20 minutes? Is that what I have? Just want to make sure. And you're muted.
Sorry, Nick. Yeah, take the full 20, and hopefully you have some time for questions at the end.
All right, sounds good. So just to remind people that if you're looking for any of our documentation or code, everything is on the website. So again, everything we do is usually back to the open source community. So we're trying to give back, including the Mattermost deployment we're going to talk about today as well. So you can see here on the software.app.mil/dsops/documents site, you're going to see the link there to our training, to the repo of containers, and all the good stuff we're doing. So again, I wanted to make sure people had access to the links. That's where you're going to find all the source code and everything we're doing. I'm not going to get into too much of the boring usual slides. I want to try to cover more of the reason why we've been able to move so fast. And Platform One has been empowering a lot of the teams across DoD and even outside of DoD now. We have dozens of agencies starting to look into the stack side of DoD to be able to piggyback on the work being done. And really, I think the number one thing is to have that central team that's able to bring enterprise services. One of the most impressive story I've seen is the deployment of our chat. We had the need starting March, 13th, 14th to deploy Mattermost, which is an open source chat option to be able to do that at FOU level. And many of the team members were sent home overnight, many times without a GFE device, so no government laptop or anything, and many times without a CAC or PIV reader, so they couldn't authenticate to many of the DoD systems. And of course, we didn't want to send them back to go get laptops or CAC readers. So the team was able to spin up in literally 28 hours since I said do this to the time it was accredited and up and running, a chat on Mattermost, accessible without a CAC, but yet bringing a ton of security and multi-factor authentication and making sure that we can onboard about 40,000 people to bring them on that chat within days. And within 28 hours, they had the chat up and running, completely containerized, passing the duty requirements thanks to the Platform One container hardening team that was able to take the container and get it approved. And so that's been really a prime example here of the value of DevSecOps, and having a central team that's able to spin up such service. We started with a chat, and then we added more and more services. We were launching Jitsi, which is a VTC option with video chat and screen sharing, very much like Zoom, but it's hosted on our cloud, on Cloud One, so we can go a much higher level of classification levels. And so that's been a great example, again, of the ability of a pipeline to take the source code and deploy this inside of our cloud on Amazon GovCloud and spin it up and scale with containers to 40,000 users overnight. And we have more than 500 teams, even outside of the Air Force. This is being used by teams across DoD, including SecDef and many other teams across DoD. And so that's been very interesting to me as a story. One, because the containerization aspect and the ability to spin up containers and auto scale based on the workload and the traffic. I see a lot of people have issues in terms of scale, and like you said, VPNs and other things becomes bottleneck. And so we created the first cloud native access point, which we got accredited. And the cloud native access point is enabling teams connect to the cloud without having to go through the tech or through the DoD access point, cloud access point on premise, which is not elastic on the cloud. And so we build this cloud native access point to be able to connect directly to the cloud. So for people remote, particularly, they don't have to VPN to their base or to the Pentagon to be able to connect to the cloud. So that removes a massive impediment to connecting to the stack. And so things like that become, pretty obvious when you're trying to scale to, 650,000 airmen, for example, and obviously even more if you count all of DoD and the contractors. So really important for us that the architecture is becoming cloud native and elastic. So the Platform One team is really bringing these enterprise services and centralizing these capabilities across not only the big programs like F-35 and Aegis, but also dozens of software teams. So that's really enabling research and also startups. And I think there's a great vision there to enable teams, smaller teams, to use Platform One to get their software accredited, particularly startups. So it's removed the impediment to work and partner with DoD and bring commercial capabilities to the DoD. So we have dozens of companies now, about 80 plus companies sending us containers automatically, and we accredit them all the way to the highest classification levels centrally across DoD. And so that alone has been I think a great success story to be able also to onboard tools and capabilities within weeks. So that's what we use to move fast. If you look at the breadth of and the size of the teams, we have all these cool names, and in the past they used to all have their own platform and their own tech stack. And now with Platform One, we can finally centralize that work and empower all these teams to focus on their software mission and really not have to reinvent the wheel, so they can move fast and benefit from reciprocity. So as you can see, we have dozens of teams all over the U.S. So we can assign work, so the space cam guys can focus on space stuff and so on. And then, if you look at the layers, and again, I think that's again the value of the way we not only accredit the software, but also the DevSecOps pipeline, streamlining the NIST compliance. If you look at all these layers, we end up with less than 10% of the controls left at the application layer. So that makes it very easy and quick to accredit. If you have single sign-on and all these cyber controls, both in terms of zero trust, behavior detection, and CV scanning that we bring with our continuous monitoring stack, you end up in a situation where the application layer is really left with very little to do. And that has been empowering the teams to move very fast. In this case, again, Mattermost in 28 hours was up and running with thousands of users consuming the service. And that tells you kind of the ability of spinning up and down workload and auto scale based on the demand. That's the beauty of containers. I think a lot of people still don't understand that Kubernetes, particularly, that's why we picked Kubernetes as the platform layer. So it auto scales and brings that baked-in security and enforcement at the platform layer while being agnostic to the cloud provider. And so really, I think that's why we were able to even do what we did, but also thanks to the incredible people we have to get this done in 28 hours again. But again, if you look at the complexity of a pipeline, if you were to deploy all these tools without containers, you would end up having to update all these tools manually in dozens of environment and classification levels. You just would not scale. And so by having the central repo, we call it Repo One for the source code side and Iron Bank for the binary side that signed containers, those repos are on the website that I showed you before, and anyone can go and download the containers. So please don't hesitate to do that. Or also contribute back, containers to us as well. We have teams sending us containers. It's a two-way street. So then we can scan anything that can be enterprise related. Of course, we don't just take containers from the mission side, but anything that can be shared across teams. We're getting containers from dozens of teams now, and commercial companies. Like I said, any commercial product that can be containerized can also be sent to us. So it can be accredited DoD wide. And that's how we end up having a lot of the tools you see here as this example of a pipeline, whether it's Jira, GitLab, GitHub, and whatever tools teams end up picking. The goal for my team is to be able to bring options, and everything is containerized and easy to update, and it self-updates, self-heal, and so that's been a prime enabler of the success of the adoption for Platform One. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. You can think of these containers as Lego blocks that can be swapped for the teams to be able to reuse these capabilities, even if it's a need of duplicating the same environment on the classified side at different classification levels. And really, once you have that ability, you use GitOps and infrastructure as code. And really, that's kind of the evolution of DevOps, and brings kind of this concept of everything is code, and everything is in your source code repo to make sure you have full compliance and audit capability of your stack, and push button deployment. And really, if you think of disaster recovery now, you only have to back up your source code repo and your databases, and now you can deploy the environment anywhere you want, even tear it down every night and bring it back up every morning if you want. That brings really the ability to have this replication and automation. And also it reduces, of course, the cyber risk, because we we pull from Git, and so it's a pull and not a push. So there's no ports open in production. So that's been also the reason why we can accredit things much faster by reducing the attack surface from the get-go. And so if you look at the kind of the benefits of that is, one, no drift between environments. So if I want to deploy the chat on multiple classification levels, on class, secret, TS, and so on, I can push button deploy into multiple environments, whether it's on premise or on the cloud, and get that kind of immutability and replication. And of course, everything is automated, so no human in production. That reduce insider threat and also reduce mistakes. And of course, the attack surface is very small, as you don't have any ports open in production for anyone to connect. No SSH, no nothing. And everything becomes code, and so you can audit your code and your desired state. And by having multiple set of eyes on code and having multiple approver to approve code mergers, we know that we can trust the code state and do change management properly as well. So that's really kind of the key benefits of the stack we deployed. So yeah, just wanted to kind of give you some of the insight as to how we were able to deploy Mattermost and many other services now, including the source code repo and all the stuff we do with complete automation, and happy to answer questions. There's a Q&A box, so I guess if you want to ask questions, you can always use that.
Well, Nick, yes, please put some information in the Q&A. I've got one comment. It's like great to see some Star Trek. You guys were running out of Star Wars terms. Kobayashi Maru. That's pretty good. I like that one. One question I have is one thing. Can you touch on the BOA process? That's a very interesting process. That basic ordering agreement. I look at it as this contingency. It's almost like contingency contracting. If you can shed some color on that, I think that's a pretty innovative approach that you have there at the Air Force.
Yeah, I think what we wanted to do for Platform One was to be able to empower teams to get access to a full stack, and that includes, of course, the acquisition of the cloud resources, licenses, and talent that's needed to run the stack. And so what we ended up doing is to set up the basic ordering agreement, like you mentioned. It's a DevSecOps contract vehicle that we stood up in 45 days. Another example of the use of Agile in contracting as well. And now that we have this awarded, and we're going to keep onboarding, by the way, more teams. And I have a slide on it. I'm going to go to the slide so you can see kind of the point of contact there. But we can now provide access to cloud services, to talent and licenses, all usually within 30 days, maybe 15 to 30 days per order. And we can buy in bulk, and we can provide access to pretty much any tool, any license, but also services, whether it's people, talent, maintenance, support, cyber, you name it, right? Anything that's needed. Right. So a program can come to Platform One and get a kind of a turnkey deployment of all of that stuff.
That's fantastic. We've got a question from John Farrell. How's the United States Air Force and DoD addressing the migration of legacy software systems to this new cloud architecture?
Yeah. So the legacy is obviously everywhere, right? And so for us, we use what we call the Strangler Pattern. And I won't have time to get into all the details of the Strangler Pattern, but we have a whole training on that. Which pretty much, the key concept is to say that we strangle the legacy and refactor the code by improving, and not just by spending 3 years rewriting it, right? So the key result is continuous delivery of new capabilities while refactoring the code at the same time. So you strangle, you take pieces, but you don't just spend 3 years rewriting the same stuff. You're adding features and prioritizing what you rewrite based on the features you need to add, so the end user sees improvements and Congress doesn't put your funding but you end up refactoring the code at the same time. So it's a very interesting way. I think it's the only way to move from legacy to DevSecOps. We have a whole training on that. So on the website, there's an Ask Me Anything recorded session on the Strangler Pattern. So I recommend people to go and watch that video, so you have a little bit more detail there.
Okay, great. We've got a couple questions around this platform run, this roadmap to Platform 1. Are we going to be able to maybe get these slides out, Nick? Is that okay?
Yeah, I'll send it to you guys, and we'll show it. And the whole slide deck is on the software.dev.mil website under the DSOP document page. So everything we do is there anyway.
Okay, and how are you addressing just code quality? I know this is like contingency coding almost. What changes when you have 28 hours to produce something? Has anything changed, or how do you address that?
No, so we didn't really
quality.
set a timeline. Right. We didn't really set a timeline, right? It ended up being 28 hours, but we didn't say, hey, you have 28 hours. We said, hey, do it. It happened to be 28 hours, but it could have been 5 days. Who knows? In this case, it was 28 hours. I think it was pretty simple, right? Mattermost is a simple application. I mean, it's just one app. So it's not rocket science, but it was still complex for the scale, right? If you were to run this on VMs and not on top of the architecture that we have, and I see another question kind of tied to that. Platform 1 was not created for COVID, right? Platform 1 was created before that, so we already had that for maybe 6 months. So we didn't build the whole team and all that during the 24 hours. That's why we were able to move so fast, right? And I think every agency should have a team like that, right? That's able to provide enterprise services to the rest of the agency at scale with DevSecOps pipelines. Platform 1 didn't have to spin up dedicated cloud environment, dedicated platforms. We have our cloud already accredited, so we can spin up workload. We segment it. We have different VPCs and all the cyber stuff, but it's very simple and push button deployment, so we can spin up a whole Kubernetes cluster with all the cyber stuff, in an hour, thanks to full automation, right? So once you have that investment made, it's very easy to replicate. And that's, at first it costs almost more money and time to build it with infrastructure as code, but that's why the return on investment is when you start deploying it a lot, right? Not having to redo that work manually 20 times and have drifts between all your environments. I think that push button deployment is game changing for us.
Great. And somebody asked something about what are you calling the chat tool?
Yeah, so there's two things, right? So Mattermost, M-O-S-T, is a chat. Mattermost. It's an open source tool. There's also a commercial version as well. It's very, very similar to Slack, but it's on premise. I can run it on my cloud, which was critical for us for accreditation and accessing more higher levels of classified data. So Mattermost is the name of the chat. Now we also deploy Jitsi, which is Jitsi. Jitsi is a VTC tool that does very much like Zoom, right? Video, screen share audio. In fact, it looks exactly like Zoom, but it's on premise. It's also open source, and the only difference you don't get a phone number, so it's all voice over IP. You could tie that to audio IP phones, but not a phone number. There's commercial version also that could bring you a phone number, but we just use the open source version. So we have a voice over IP on mobile and laptops, but we don't have a phone number to dial in.
That's fantastic. I think one thing I would like to know is, what is the biggest surprise? I'm sure there are a lot of surprises. What are the, it's almost like you were building this whole agile DevSecOps platform for this kind of a disaster. But what has been your biggest surprise, a couple big surprises in the last 5 weeks?
Well, I think you're right. I think it's not really just for this kind of disaster. I think it's, for us being in the war business, you never know what can happen, and you have to be ready, and preparedness and being able to react in a timely fashion might be the difference between life or death, right? So you need to be able to move at a pace of relevance, and people often forget that, right? So timeliness, I think, is very critical. Even in cyber, right? If you can update stuff quickly, that might be the difference between getting hacked or not getting hacked, right? So it's great to have change management and all the governance and compliance, but if it's a trade-off to your pace and your timeliness, that could actually be a bigger risk than not having governance and compliance, right? So there's a balance there.
Right.
The biggest surprise, I would say, was that first it was a little bit faster than I thought we would be able to do stuff, and the pace was a little bit better than I thought. But also, there's pros and cons, right? I think people need to get their job done, so many just went and spin up stuff on public clouds, and of course you end up with shadow IT and issues in cyber there. So again, that's why also these enterprise service matter, and deploying it fast is critical, right? The fact that we had Mattermost up and running in 24 hours versus 3-4 weeks was probably the difference between having a ton of data leaked on WhatsApp and Signal and Facebook chat and whatever people were using, because they have to get their job done, right? So I think that was critical to be able to move fast. But you still see egos get in the way, and people still want to use their own things, and that's okay to a point, right? At some point, someone has to show up and say, "That's it. You're going to use this," and we have to be careful, right? One size fits all is never the answer, but also you do need some enterprise, services that are funded and maintained and sustained. So there's a fine line. My take is I always try to bring two options, and if it's cyber tools, we probably have 20, but some things at least 2, never 1.
Right.
So that's kind of the way we do it.
Great. Well, thank you, Nicholas. It's been very, very informative, and thank you for your service. It's a good thing you did all this work over the last couple of years, because now you're seeing it in action big time. So thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. And just for your group here, tomorrow at 1 p.m., we have an Ask Me Anything session of 2 hours where I answer questions. And I know we had plenty of questions here we didn't have time to answer. So if they're willing to join us tomorrow, it's on the software.me website. On the event page, we have a Zoom session where people can come and ask me more questions on the tech or whatever they want to ask. So it's going to be tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern time.
Okay, we'll be sure to get that out with our outputs today, and that'll be right at the top of the list.
Awesome. Thank you for having me, guys. Thanks.
Okay, and we'll get the next panel going. I think Maddie, who's working behind the scenes here, helping us put this together along with Kirsten from my team. Can we put the first poll out? Is that possible? There we go. Okay. The host and panelists cannot vote. That's what we see. But we want to try to do a quick poll if we can get folks engaged. Please answer real quick. We're going to take these. We've got like 200 participants almost 200 participants on this webinar. So this would be a very good representative example across government and industry. If you can answer this real quick. For some reason, the hosts and panelists cannot vote, so don't feel, to my esteemed panel, don't feel like you're left out. All right, we'll give it another, this shouldn't take too long, Maddie, so can we show some results? So yeah, we've, ATARC, as many of you know, a lot of you have been to our events in the past. It's been a very big challenge for us. I mean, we were in events, primarily events, and now we're going completely virtual. And you'll be seeing, we'll have a lot of these interesting webinars. I'm liking the format, but we're also going to have a virtual event, which is our first foray into that. And we're going to cover cybersecurity. We're going to cover DevOps. We're going to cover cloud and infrastructure, digital. That should be a great event. We're going to do that on June 11th. I'm sure you'll get an email or 10 from us. So Can we get the poll results? Here we go. Been teleworking for years, 53%. We've settled into it. A large shift we're adjusting, still having difficulties. Interesting. Has your team had the same amount of output since the telework shift? More productive, we've stayed the same, slightly less productive, and we're overall less productive. Interesting. Any takeaways from my esteemed panel there? If you guys want to unmute before I introduce you.
Yeah, it's a positive picture. It paints a fairly positive picture.
It does.
Really interesting as far as probably the amount of learning in government.
Right. Right. Ed, any comment to that? Was that surprising to you, knowing your agency?
From my standpoint, no. We've been.
Yeah.
I work for 18F, which is within GSA, and 18F is naturally just built in is remote. And so it was just another day. But I've heard from friends elsewhere in government that had, others have, I think, talked about it already. Just those with a robust telework plan probably had the least amount of change. And I've heard there was some stuff they had to work out, especially around probably the anything with more robust processing or storage that they were trying to do on-prem, right?
Right.
But then I've heard from other friends that were working in the SCIF, et cetera, just, difficulties that way. So,
yeah,
there's lots of learning.
And you're gonna be, I just, we just kind of do this thing, but John, I'd really be interested to see from the commercial side how does that match up against the commercial side? I know you have experience across public sector and the commercial side. Is that what you expect, or is it a little different, or what's your experience?
Tom, I would tell you that I'm a GitLab, and we've been practicing this idea of being all remote for a long time. There's, while there's 50 or 60 of us working in the public sector, there's 1,200 of us. We're all remote. We're doing video conferences and chats, and we're doing this all the time. So for us, we would be way up at the higher part of it. But as I talk to my counterparts in commercial businesses, this has been a transition for many of them. They were used to coming into the office, and now they're having to adapt. So I think it's probably very similar to what we see in this poll. Yeah, it's different. I mean, in the public sector, in commercial, we don't typically have SCIFs. That's typically not something we would have to manage. But yeah, I think it's very similar.
Right. And Edward, any surprises from you on this, or it follow with what you were thinking?
We had to adjust a little bit, but overall it's been pretty smooth. Most of the Department of Transportation has everybody at least on one telework day as an option, or a lot of people sign up for it. So, it was more about just setting it up for a larger scale amount of people to be using the services. But I felt like the CIO shop for the main department did a great job of just moving forward and getting us up to speed for that.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, so we are going to go back to our plan here, and we're going to start off with Brian Fox with 18F. And Brian already is remote. He hasn't been in Washington, D.C. I think we had our Devops kickoff, and he's out in Denver, Colorado. So Brian, welcome, and look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Tom, thanks for putting this together and bringing us together. It's a very relevant discussion these days, right? Just how folks are getting along and how technology is playing a role in helping us get along and deal with it and maintain some productivity. So yeah, just some of my deeper thoughts as far as DevOps in the response to COVID and what I've seen from my seat at 18F, as well as conversations with colleagues in government. I tend to think, DevOps is really just Agile on steroids, with the cloud being those steroids, right? So Agile plus cloud, it's DevOps. So what I've noticed is DevOps and cloud and Agile has enabled COVID response in a couple of ways. First is the ability to address social distancing in the workplace. And the second would be the flexibility, speed, and robustness to technically lead in an effective response. So just around flexibility, speed, and robustness, I think just the agile work method, which is it's not top down, it's not directed, it's flat. It's very team oriented, and it's about transparency and like vulnerable sharing. And that is great on just a day-to-day basis. But in the midst of a crisis, I think it's critical. It's definitely the best way to manage a crisis. And so with Agile really preaching the scrumming or the huddling, right? That every morning you come together, quickly describe what's necessary, possible, what's a priority, and what's blocking you from progress. And within, that sprint planning, constantly examining what the organization's priorities are, I think is critical. Nick, it was really interesting hearing from Nick and what the Air Force has been going through, but then also what they've done here very recently. And, I think he described it well, that agile methodology allows you to, plan out a bit, but then when something hits that you have to deal with, you can do sprint planning and deal with whatever the crisis du jour is and mitigate that. Overall, right, Agile addresses the feedback from users and the ability to respond to that new organizational needs, like responding to COVID, whether it's a new COVID website or giving your own organization the tools it needs to get productive in a new way of working. So for those folks that were used to coming into the office, how are we gonna, kick everybody back home? And what tools do we need to do that? I think Agile in general allows for that kind of discussion to happen in a very productive way. Other things, right? Just talking about the cloud, the ability there to do A/B testing to ensure your new applications are working, to the ability to launch those new applications very quickly, rapid delivery of all of that, thanks to automation, those CI/CD pipelines and Devops that are typically up in the cloud. Agile has a feedback loop that's typically a week or two, whatever that sprint length is, right? It gives feedback to the team. I think with DevOps, it's the ability to shrink that even shorter to get that feedback much more quickly. So that is going to have, I think, an exponentially more positive benefit to an organization. The faster they can get that response of a new website, for instance, that's related to COVID, that's good for the organization. It's obviously great for the users. With the cloud, you're never down. So for some government offices, I'm sure, Tom, you were talking about how things changed overnight. To think about demand for government services, that there was probably some government websites that one day were pretty sleepy and the next day they were getting hammered, right? Yeah. So with the cloud, the ability to scale and pay for just what you need, but also make sure that the user is going to get what they need. So it's like all three things there, I think, are critical. The ability to patch, fix, and update and upgrade, make that transparent to the user, all in the midst of the pandemic is going to be, extremely critical. So that's all just around speed, flexibility, and robustness. As far as that social distancing, kind of the second point, and social distancing and productivity, if you've been operating in an office environment, you're going to be pretty dependent on geographic density for productivity.
Right.
So those tools associated with DevOps, like Slack, cloud hosting of data services, et cetera, allow you to be anywhere and yet be really effective at work. The ability to work together despite dispersal. And obviously, none of it matters if you can't provide those services to the public and users. Real quick.
One question I have for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
No,
it just came to my mind. So
go. Shoot.
So I'm like, I know a lot of development shops inside of the government. They have maybe their blend of contractors and feds, but sometimes they're co-located. So what, now that they are not co-located, what specific approaches they need to take? Because I think that's beyond telecommuting. It's like, how do I collaborate now?
Yep. Steve Jobs called it the collisions, right, at Pixar. And he drove a particular train of thought and vision as far as to facilitate those geographic collisions in a building, right? I remember in the biography, he fought over only having one bathroom so that everybody would have a chance to meet and mingle. So how do you do that if you're virtual? And I think that's the critical role of some of those tools. Nick was talking about it. And so like friends of mine over at DOI that are migrating from Google here over the past few months to Microsoft, I told them to be really excited about Microsoft Teams because it's a Slack-like tool that allows, what's powerful with Slack or with Teams is the ability to create those platform channels. That it's kind of interesting that Slack is kind of like a channelized communication, kind of like a platform.
Right.
The ability to create those threads that folks can join in, they can read the history on, unlike an email. And for those teams and organizations to allow the creation of a lot of those channels. It may be, in the case of my organization, 18F and TTS, Technology Transformation Services, there's threads going right now or channels on how are you coping with COVID? How are you working as a parent, as well as all of our, organizational mission, and the ability to create or recreate virtually what would be happening around the water cooler, I think is critical. But doing that well, you need that bubble of psychological safety, so folks are willing to share and open up online. And so I don't know if that answers your question, Tom.
I think you did. That was great. That was fantastic. Edward, you want to chime into this conversation? Thank you, Brian.
Well, looking at the keynote, I thought that was really great. It is about the platform for us too. We have one that we call the Transit Integrated Application Development Platform, which is what we use for our external users or our customers to be able to interact with us. And, as part of that platform, the strategy is using DevOps to accelerate bringing new things onto that platform as fast as possible. And so when I think about platforms too, for a long time I was trying to rationalize or understand what they meant. They've been around for a long time. They were more for products. So product platforms were, I think, what was really big. In particular, I remember reading a case study about Black & Decker in the 1970s and how they ended up dominating the entire market for power tools because they realized instead of building individual things for every single power tool, what if they created product families or platforms for their tools, and instead of having 50 different engines, they really only had one engine. And then if they wanted to scale that engine up to be like twice as fast, they would just put two of those engines together, which is the same exact thing you see with the Tesla car. And how this relates to the IT world is that we have all these pieces that we need to be reusing from a system to system, right? When you look at the infrastructure piece of it, that's usually the easiest area of commonality. Identity management can be another piece. And then the other things become more and more challenging to do because they can be more specific to different organizations. But, when you look at, that infrastructure piece and you're talking about that horsepower, putting two engines together is creating more scalability. And that's the way it is when you look at a user base. And if you have more and more users going on to something, if you have a piece that's really scalable, then you can allow more and more to come into it and you can just adjust up. And so, you take those ideas and you apply them to what you're doing inside of your infrastructure. And that's where you get that value of the platform. It's the platform with DevOps and the ability to rapidly put things into place. We've been working with containers. I think Nick's a little bit further ahead. As the Department of Transportation, that's something we're actually doing as a whole. So DevOps has been pieces of it have been put in place in NHTSA. They've been put in place in FMCSA, the federal motor carriers. we've been working with the department. We're looking at doing a consolidated Jenkins and having like a container marketplace for everybody within the department to use, stuff like that, to standardize that infrastructure the way that Nick was talking about. You know, when I think about it, one of the areas that I think wasn't talked as much about was we focused a lot on the infrastructure side of things. And so I'm not going to talk as much about that. But then there's also the software delivery piece of that. So, you know, you can automate building up these environments. You can create a lot of scalability through automation and things like that. But then you can also deliver things faster. But, you know, that is a little bit different of an investment. So when I look at like my whole infrastructure and creating commonalities and things like that, I think that's an easier area to invest in, because you're just like trying to standardize and deal with your commodity IT and make it cheaper and more consistent. But then when you look at applications, they all run on different cycles or different cadences, and they have more needs depending on or different needs depending on the types of users you're dealing with. So when I have high usage applications that I'm constantly deploying on a week by week basis, new features and things like that, that's where I'm going to more heavily invest in other DevOps tools, such as automated testing or dealing with more performance testing on a week by week basis. Whereas if I have something that I'm only updating once a year, it's going to be less worthwhile to deal with those types of things. But then again, like the other issue with that is that puts me at risk because of, you know, one of the things that Nick was highlighting is one of the most important things when you're dealing with a DevOps strategy is making your GitHub the source of truth. In the ideal world, I want to like have this source of truth that I can pull from, and now I can get the latest code, be able to rely on my automated tests and all that stuff. And so the more frequently I'm validating that my Git is valid, then I know I have a source of truth. You know, and then, you know, you have the automation of the way that you're dealing with your software. You have the automation of your infrastructure. And then what you have all around supporting that is some of this knowledge management stuff that Brian was talking about. And, you know, for us, what we do is we use some tools like Atlassian for Jira and things like that. So a long time ago, we decided, let's get out of the business of like doing things via email. Let's get out of the business of having phone conversations or side conversations. Because, you know, if we're building something, like if I'm building a drill and I decide to make that drill have like a 8-foot long drill bit, I need to understand why that decision was made. And I don't want to go through emails and search for the person who was in that discussion to figure out why that decision was made. So we started using these collaboration tools and making sure that everybody was talking within the context of the particular changes we were doing. So we have, you know, tickets that track changes of things, and then we keep all of our discussions there. And so when this virtualized world we've been dealing with came about, it didn't really impact the way that we were collaborating on changes. And then, you know, Agile, of course, with some of this other stuff, was around to support it too. So since we are doing things on 2-week cycles, it was very easy for us to split off and reprioritize things as they came up with the changing of the guard or the new world we're dealing with, and some of those types of things. So at a high level, I think that's the way I look at it from our department's point of view. Does that make sense?
Yep, that's been fantastic. And last but certainly not least, John from sunny Florida, I believe, right?
It is sunny Florida, but it's raining today, which we needed the rain, so I'm happy to get a little bit of rain. So Tom, I'm going to go quick, and I want to make sure we have time for Q&A. I'm going to underline a couple of things. What Edward was just talking about documenting things is incredibly important, and it's one of the lessons we learned as we adopted an all remote format for our company. And as we've grown, we've gone from 200 people when I joined 2 years ago to 1,200 today. We've doubled twice, more than doubled twice in my tenure here, and it's amazing. I've been working remote for 10 years. GitLab's been doing it ever since we started, and we're around the world. And so here's some of the lessons learned we had. One, it's about process and culture and the tools you use, and you want to make sure you have those in place. And we heard about that today, right? Edward talked about that. You have to have the mechanics, and Brian as well, about how they're doing it at 18F. That has to be there. Documenting everything. We have a handbook as our single source of truth. We put everything into our handbook. It's public, it's open. You can read it. You can even edit our handbook if you like. If you think we have a typo, we're open to you making suggestions as well. But But that's how we learn. That's how we get better. We share, we collaborate, and that's part of what this is all about. And it's having access to the right tools. And Zoom being one of them, we document everything. All of our meetings are structured with a living document where we live edit our meetings. We live edit the agenda, and we live edit the notes as we go. It's incredibly efficient. It's one of the things we try to focus on. It's how we've learned how to work together. We really work on tools so we can share, and just like we were talking about earlier with Edward about having that history of what happened and why. Yeah. As we work on these issues, we work on these things asynchronously, having that history to be able to go back and understand why did we make that decision, and then we can learn from it going forward, and we really spend less time continuing making mistakes over again. I'm going to put a link in the chat, which is a link to a report we published. It's a 36-page handbook we took from the handbook, and we wrote this playbook on all remote. It's all of our lessons learned. It's some of the things I covered here. I'll put that in the chat if anybody wants to go, grab it and download it. You could. And the last thing about being the water cooler, I think Brian mentioned that about doing those things. We do those a lot. We have a kids juice box chat because our families are now home with us too. So we bring our families in, and we get on Zoom, and the kids have fun with Zoom and chatting with each other. And so that's natural to what we do. And the last thing we're going to do later today, actually, our team and marketing, we're going to do a virtual happy hour. We do them all the time, but this one's going to be different. We're going to live stream it on YouTube. So if anybody checks me out, I'll put my Twitter handle also. If you check me out, I'll tweet when it goes, and you can come see what a virtual happy hour looks like, at least the way we do it at GitLab. So that's, I think, it for that. I'd love to answer questions, though, and share with anyone else what we've learned at GitLab doing this.
Yeah, it's like you got the virtual Margaritaville shirt on, so you got you're in the spirit. It's definitely 5 o'clock somewhere pretty soon. I think after this webinar. Maybe we can, Maddie. Maybe we could sneak in a poll question really quick. And this handbook we'll put in. It's in the chat. Don't worry. We're going to also attach it to our get this out as part of our deliverables today. Maddie, we have time for a quick poll, and then we'll get to some questions. Okay. I think I know the answer to this. I don't want to sabotage the poll, but that's the first rule in polling. You don't do what I just did. Okay, we'll do this one quick, Maddie. Okay, this is another one. Okay, how's your organization adjusting to security and COVID-19? This is a good one. Okay. Fantastic. All right, do it while you have them. Let's go make these public, Maddie. There you go. So, fairly even, I don't know. It goes back to what we were talking about before, I think. So I don't know if there's, any comments from the panelists? And then we can go to some questions. Anything? I don't know if we thought there was anything profound in that. Is there anything that we didn't expect?
I think it would tie Tom right back into those folks that are learning as far as telework and org culture and the tools. They're probably learning and leaning in on security rules too, loosening up or discussing and working through folks being home and needing to be productive. So.
Okay. Send in your questions. We had some platform ones, but I'll ask the same thing I asked Nick, and we didn't get a chance to talk about it. What has been the most surprising thing since pandemic hit that has changed that you've seen? What's been the most surprising thing? Is there anything that, that sticks out? I'll tell you what. Go ahead.
Some of the government services, and I think one of the lessons learned probably across government will be around human-centered design and agility and speed of delivering on those services, the ability to change a website very quickly and make it easy to log into and accessible to the public in all those ways.
I think we've seen a lot of that. I mean, look at the IRS. They've had like 550,000 concurrent users on their website, I think yesterday. 550,000. SBA, they had to stand up the SBA loan program. Massive amounts of, I think that's got to be the new normal. You don't know if your agency might have to expand its capability on a moment's notice. So they need to have something that's going to scale.
And I think the technology part of it, and I think part of it will be the culture of being okay with that uncertainty and the flexibility around it, as opposed to wanting everything certain in permanent ink for the rest of the year, waterfall method, and just the processes around managing all of that effectively. Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, do we have any questions, Maddie? Any more? Let's do one more poll. Let's try to hit the next poll. Here we go. I know, there we, oh, this is actually a pretty good one. We still got a lot of people participating. Let's see what we do here. This is going to be interesting.
Yeah, Time, if you don't mind me chiming in, because both John and Ed and I were talking about the power of platform. And back when I was in the intelligence community, post 9/11, there was a particular academic and author that got a lot of traction on his thoughts. And they're probably as relevant today. I put it in the chat there. Clay Shirky's book, Here Comes Everybody or Everyone. An interesting book, and he describes the power of platforms over things like email to kind of highlight Edward's comment there.
I've been lucky enough to meet Clay. He's a very interesting guy. I haven't seen any of his books lately, so that's a good takeaway. Okay, mostly the same. I'm surprised. I thought there'd be a lot more lenient. There hasn't really been that. Do you think that's encouraging, or I think it's maybe we already had it?
It's the 17% that made it more strict that it has me somewhat scratching my head.
Yeah, how could you make it more strict? Interesting. Okay. Well, I think we're getting to the end of the hour. Is there some last thoughts? Can we go through the panelists? This time we'll start off with you, John.
So, from where I'm sitting with what we do at GitLab as far as the power of a platform and what we're doing to try to help organizations and agencies better serve their customers. I mean, we're partnering with Nicholas and Nick and what he's doing at Platform One. We're just happy and humbled to be able to serve and to help everyone else build and deliver software and respond to this. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to field those. But thanks for the opportunity to share what we've learned.
Yep. Stay cool down there, John.
Will do.
Edward?
If you want to go down this path and you really want to build things faster and, leverage DevSecOps, I think it's important to remember that just because you can build things faster doesn't mean you solve all your problems. Then you need to be able to react faster. That's where Agile comes in. And then, as you start using Agile, you're going to be using Agile with technologies. You need to be able to define what is good or bad with those technologies and put some rules in place or some guidelines. And once you do that, then you can start automating it. And that's when you start putting your DevSecOps pipeline in place, is once you have a good understanding of what is good with those technologies and are able to put those guardrails in place. And that's the evolution. And right now, if your agency is struggling or you're trying to figure out ways to react faster, it's not about bringing in tools. It's about changing your process a little bit to be more reactive and, taking some of the things from Agile. You don't necessarily need to move from deploying like every 3 months to every week. Instead, meet more frequently, see more of what you're building, get a better understanding so there's less surprises, so you can be more engaged. And then you can develop more and more capability around that. I think that's really the most important thing.
Great. Thank you, Ed. Brian?
Yeah, Tom, I think what you're doing here, this sharing of lessons learned, is going to be critical. There's going to be departments and offices and agencies that have gone through and maybe even got more productive, that didn't feel as much pain. Others that felt quite a bit. And I think it's going to be very critical to spread those lessons learned, the failures, the successes, the benefits of various work methods and technologies. Change. I work for Technology Transformation Services, an 18F, right? And I think this is silver lining, maybe platinum lining in all of this, is the opportunity to help push change. Because if folks were dragging their feet or pushing back because they weren't comfortable with Agile or DevOps or cloud migration or adoption, now's the time to describe what someone else was able to experience. And maybe it was less painful. Maybe there was benefits to remote work or whatever. So I think we need to keep this conversation going to facilitate that continuous need to modernize IT and government and transform how we do things.
Yeah. Yep. Thank you. Well put, Brian. And maybe that segues into, we do have our working groups in DevOps. They're very, very active. I think we've got 80, 90 government people in them. We'll send out some information for follow-up for government and industry and how you can participate. I think those meetings have been very productive, and we're just getting started with this conversation. And I want to thank all the panelists. Thank you very much for your time. This has been a fun experience, and definitely thank you, GitLab and John and the rest, and Helen, and appreciate you guys making this possible for us, and appreciate the partnership. Thank you all. And the last thing is thank you for all the participants. Wonderful. You guys asked a lot of great questions, a very engaged crowd, and we look forward to more discussions in the future. Everybody have a good afternoon. Thank you.